The year 1914, a year that would change the course of history forever. It marked the beginning of a conflict so devastating, so all-encompassing, so world-altering that it would forever be known as the Great War, a war that would redefine the very nature of warfare. This was World War I, a conflict that claimed millions of lives, shattered empires, and redrew the map of Europe. The legacy of World War I continues to shape our world today, influencing international relations and global politics. Understanding its causes and consequences is crucial to understanding the world we live in, the alliances, the treaties, the ambitions. This is the story of that war, a story of ambition, of sacrifice, and of the enduring cost of conflict, a tale of human resilience and tragedy. This war, unlike any before, touched every corner of the globe, involving nations from every continent. From the battlefields of Europe to the shores of Africa, the conflict's reach was vast and unforgiving, leaving no land untouched. Its impact transcended borders, leaving an unforgettable mark on the social, political, and cultural landscape of the world. It changed societies and altered destinies. We must remember this war, its lessons, and its costs, for only by understanding our past can we hope to build a better future, one where such devastation is never repeated. Europe in the early 20th century was a powder keg ready to explode. Nationalism, a fierce sense of pride and superiority, gripped nations. Empires hungry for power and prestige clashed over colonies and control. A complex web of alliances forged in fear and ambition bound nations together in a dangerous game of brinkmanship. Germany, a rising power, challenged the established order. Its growing industrial and military might threatened the balance of power. Great Britain, France, and Russia, wary of Germany's ambitions, formed their own alliances. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, provided the spark. A Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, fired the fatal shots. The world watched in disbelief as Europe, step by agonizing step, marched towards war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand sent shockwaves through Europe. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding satisfaction for the assassination. Serbia, backed by Russia, refused to comply fully. The fragile peace began to unravel. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The dominoes began to fall. Russia, bound by treaty to protect Serbia, mobilized its army. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia, and then on France, Russia's ally. Great Britain, obligated to defend Belgium's neutrality, declared war on Germany on August 4th. The Great War had begun. What began as a regional conflict in the Balkans had exploded into a global conflagration. Millions of soldiers, fueled by patriotism and propaganda, marched off to war, believing it would be a short and glorious adventure. The early months of the war saw swift movements and bold offensives. Germany, following the Schlieffen Plan, aimed for a quick victory over France by sweeping through neutral Belgium. However, the German advance was halted at the Marne River in France. The war on the Western Front settled into a deadly stalemate. Soldiers on both sides dug in, creating a vast network of trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles across France and Belgium. Life in the trenches was a nightmare. Soldiers faced constant bombardment, disease, and the ever-present threat of enemy attack. The battles of the Western Front became infamous for their brutality and futility. New technologies like the machine gun and poison gas made warfare deadlier than ever before. The stalemate on the Western Front dragged on for 4 long years. World War I was a conflict unlike any other, marked by technological advancements that forever changed the face of warfare. The machine gun, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, transformed battlefields into killing fields. Poison gas, a horrifying new weapon, choked and blinded soldiers, leaving a legacy of suffering. Tanks, lumbering behemoths of steel, were introduced in an attempt to break the deadlock of trench warfare. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, soon became weapons of war, engaging in dogfights above the trenches. Submarines, lurking beneath the waves, waged a silent war on shipping, sinking merchant vessels and warships alike. These technological innovations made World War I a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality. The industrialization of warfare had transformed conflict, making it more impersonal, more devastating, and more far-reaching than ever before. The romanticized image of warfare was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of industrial-scale slaughter. While the Western Front raged, the conflict spread to every corner of the globe. In the east, Russia battled Germany and Austria-Hungary, engaging in vast and costly battles. The Ottoman Empire, allied with the Central Powers, fought against Russia, Britain, and France in the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, and the Dardanelles. The war spread to Africa, as British, French, and Belgian colonial forces clashed with German and Ottoman troops. In Asia, Japan, allied with Britain, seized German colonies in the Pacific. The war at sea raged across the globe as German U-boats targeted Allied shipping. from the frozen wastelands of Russia to the scorching deserts of the Middle East. The war touched the lives of millions far from the battlefields of Europe. The conflict drew in people from every continent, creating a truly global war. The global nature of the conflict highlighted the interconnectedness of the world. In 1917, two events dramatically altered the course of the war. The first was the entry of the United States into the conflict, angered by German submarine attacks on American ships and the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed an alliance with Mexico against the United States. America declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917. The second event was the Russian Revolution. The strains of war led to the collapse of the Tsarist regime and the rise of the Bolsheviks. Russia, racked by internal turmoil, signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in March 1918, withdrawing from the war. The entry of the United States into the war, with its fresh troops and industrial might, provided a much-needed boost to the Allied forces. The American presence helped to tip the balance of power in favor of the Allies. The Central Powers, exhausted and outnumbered, were now facing defeat. By the fall of 1918, the Central Powers were on the verge of collapse, their armies exhausted and their resources depleted. Germany, facing internal unrest, economic hardship and military defeat, had no choice but to sue for peace. On November 11, 1918, at 11 o'clock in the morning, an armistice was signed in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, France. The guns fell silent, marking the end of 4 years of brutal conflict. The Great War was over, and a sense of relief washed over the world. The world rejoiced at the news of peace, with celebrations erupting in cities and towns across the globe. But the cost of victory was staggering, leaving deep scars on the landscape and the people. Millions lay dead. Families were torn apart, and entire nations were in ruins, struggling to rebuild their lives. The world struggled to come to terms with the scale of the devastation as efforts to rebuild began. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war, but it also imposed harsh terms on the defeated nations. The treaty, however, sowed the seeds of future conflict, as many felt it was unjust and overly punitive. Germany, blamed for the war, was forced to accept harsh reparations payments and territorial concessions, leading to widespread suffering and resentment. The treaty left a legacy of bitterness and resentment, particularly in Germany, setting the stage for future conflicts and the rise of extremist ideologies. The Great War left an indelible scar on the world. The conflict claimed the lives of an estimated 15 to 22 million people. Millions more were wounded physically and emotionally. Entire generations were decimated. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield. The collapse of empires and the redrawing of national borders created new tensions and conflicts. The Spanish flu, a devastating pandemic that swept the globe in 1918, killed millions more, exacerbating the war's toll. The world struggled to rebuild, both physically and emotionally. The war's impact on the arts, literature, and culture was profound. A generation of artists and writers, scarred by the horrors they had witnessed, sought to make sense of the conflict and its aftermath. The world that emerged from the Great War was a different place. The Great War was a watershed moment in human history, a conflict that reshaped nations and altered the course of the 20th century. It marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, forever changing the political and social landscape of Europe and beyond. The war's legacy continues to shape our world today, influencing everything from international relations to cultural memory. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to create a lasting peace, ultimately failed to address the underlying causes of the war, leaving many issues unresolved. The treaty's harsh treatment of Germany created resentment and instability in Europe, paving the way for the rise of extremism and the outbreak of World War II just 2 decades later, a conflict even more devastating than the first. The war's impact on technology, warfare, and international relations continues to resonate today, with innovations that change the nature of combat forever. The development of new weapons such as tanks and chemical warfare, the rise of total war, involving entire populations in the war effort, and the creation of international organizations like the League of Nations, all had a profound impact on the course of the 20th century, setting the stage for future global cooperation. The Great War was a global tragedy, a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, with millions of lives lost and countless others forever changed. Its legacy serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and the pursuit of peace, lessons that remain relevant in our world today. The Great War, though a century past, holds enduring relevance. Its lessons resonate deeply in our modern world. We must remember the sacrifices made, the horrors endured, and the fragility of peace. The stories of those who lived through this tumultuous period must be preserved and shared. From the soldiers who fought in the trenches to the nurses who tended the wounded, from the families torn apart to the nations forever changed, the Great War left an indelible mark on the human experience. By remembering this conflict, we honor their sacrifices and acknowledge the enduring impact of their experiences. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. Nationalism, unchecked ambition, and the failure of diplomacy led the world into a devastating war. By studying the causes and consequences of the Great War, we gain valuable insights into the dynamics of conflict and the importance of peaceful resolution. Lest we forget.